In this video, we are going to be discussing about the most secure Linux operating systems in 2021. So, let's get started. So now let's look at the most secure Linux distributions. We are going to be exploring 3 of the secure Linux distributions, which include the Tails OS X, the Whonix Privacy and Anonymity OS, and then we have the Qubes OS X system. First up, we have Tails. We are going to be discussing the advantages and the disadvantages of this operating system. The first one is that it works with a live CD. This means that you can install Tails on a hard drive and then you can boot your system with it. It is really simple to install and easy to use. Then we have that Tails cannot be installed on a hard drive of a computer. So like Windows, Mac or Linux, you can't install Tails on as your host machine on your computer. It has to run on a USB stick or as a virtual machine. Tails is really good for spies. Now we'll get to that point just in a second. The Tails OS X system does not have any persistence. At the second you end your session with Tails, all your data, files, videos and everything in the operating system gets deleted. That is why it is really good for spies. Because all they have to do is that they have to access the internet for just a second and then they have to clear all the logs in the host machine. They can do that by the Tails operating system. The latest versions of Tails have come with a password protected partition in the computer memory. That means if you want to store your data and your files, videos and everything that you have in the operating system, you can do that by creating a partition in the USB stick or the hard drive that you are running in Tails, and that partition will be password protected. So whenever you want to access your data, you can just add in your password and you can access the data. Now as I told you, all files and documents get erased at the moment you end the session with Tails. So let's say you are doing some work and you end the session, you just unplug the hard drive and shut down. Now whenever you boot up the system, you will get a clean slate with no data. Then we have that Tails erases all the logs made by the computer in the RAM. So whatever you do in your computer system, it gets logged onto the RAM. So let's say you want to access an app, you are doing something, you are refreshing, you are changing the wallpaper, whatever you do in your computer system gets logged on the RAM. Whenever the Tails session is ended, it erases all the logs on the RAM so there is no trace that the person has accessed the host machine. Now Tails uses the Tor relay to access the internet. The Tor relay is a system like proxies. So it takes your request and it puts it on another computer which is running Tor. And that request jumps from 3 to 4 systems continuously until it reaches the website. Let's say I want to access facebook.com. I tell my request to Tor, then Tor forwards this request not to facebook.com but to another computer. Now this computer receives it and sends it to another. This process repeats about 4 to 5 times until the last computer sends the request to facebook.com. Now as I told you, you get a fresh slate every time you boot your Tails system up. Now let's talk about the Whonix system. We are going to be discussing the advantages and the disadvantages of the system. First up, we have that this OS is very practical. We'll get to this point in a second. The disadvantage of this is that it uses the Tor to access the internet. This is also an advantage and a disadvantage, and we'll get to that point in the next slide. Now Whonix allows part-time use. So basically you can install Whonix as a virtual machine and you can simply access your host machine and the Whonix machine at the same time. Then we have the disadvantages that most websites block the Tor browser. So every website knows the Tor browser's endpoints. So from the endpoints, it accesses the website. So most bank websites and most multinational company websites, they blacklist the Tor username so that we can't access the website. So that is why I have listed using the Tor internet in a disadvantage. Then we have that it works as a virtual machine in your system. So you can create a virtual machine in your host system and you can use Whonix in that. Then we have that you cannot use Netflix as Tor is blacklisted, as all the Tor endpoints are blacklisted or blocked. Next up, we have the Tor as an advantage because it allows a lot of privacy. Although it is blacklisted by most of the website, it is not blacklisted by many of the websites. Let's say you do not want to use Tor. You can simply go ahead in your host machine and use the browser there. That is a really good point for Whonix because it is running as a virtual machine, so you can access the internet from your host machine and then you can go on to your Whonix machine and do whatever things you are doing. So Whonix is very difficult to install. I had a lot of problem getting up into my system, but if you give it a lot of time, you get a hang of it. Now the last point in Whonix is that if the host OS gets hacked, all the data will be exposed. So let's say you are using a Windows computer and your Windows gets hacked. And you are also using Whonix as a virtual machine in the Windows computer. So the Windows computer will expose all the information that it has in its memory, and that is really easy to hack Whonix within. Next up, we have the Qubes OS X system. We are going to be discussing the advantages and disadvantages as always. There is no separate host system in Qubes. So let's say you are running a Windows computer and you want to install Qubes in your system. Qubes OS will not be installed in Windows, rather it will go onto your CPU and the CPU will allow a partition in its memory, RAM and CPU. You can run Qubes as a virtual machine there. Next up, we have that it is limited compatibility, is supported by very few devices. So Qubes is an operating system which has very less compatibility. Then we are going to be having, it has a lot less layers of complexity than Whonix. That is why it is much easier to hack Qubes than Whonix. Next up, we have that you have to use a different computer if you do not want to access Tor as your host web browser. Now the advantage is it is very easy to control and it is really user friendly. As I told you, it does not work in old computers and it is really hard to install. There are some OS X that are specifically made for hackers. These include Kali Linux, Black Arch, and Metasploitable. These are really secure but not as secure as the 3 operating systems we just discussed. Now, the big question is, what do I recommend? I say that you should use Whonix. Whonix is not very easy to install, but it has a lot of compatibility, user interfaces, and it has a lot of features that can protect your privacy. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please smash that like button down there, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which tutorial video should I do next. Bye for now.